Commander Lyra Blackwood stared at the alien delegation from across the polished obsidian table. The Consortium representatives, tall, regal beings with iridescent scales and eyes like liquid mercury, barely acknowledged her presence. Their attention was fixed on Admiral Thorn, the only other human in the room. "Admiral," said Archon Zex Voreth, his voice a melodious cascade that belied his species' reputation for ruthless efficiency. "Once again, we extend our generous offer of protection to your colonies in the Cygnus Arm. The Vrekkai incursions grow more aggressive by the cycle." Lyra kept her face impassive. The Consortium had been offering protection to humanity for the past decade, protection that amounted to little more than glorified vassalage. Earth's United Solar Coalition had managed to rebuff them diplomatically thus far, but resources were stretched thin across humanity's modest interstellar holdings. "And once again, Archon," Admiral Thorn replied, his weathered face betraying nothing, "I must respectfully decline on behalf of the USC. Our defense systems are adequate." The Consortium representatives exchanged glances that even Lyra, with her extensive xenological training, couldn't quite interpret. But their condescension was unmistakable. "Adequate?" The word slithered from Zex Voreth's lipless mouth. "Your species has barely mastered rudimentary gravitic manipulation. Your fastest ships would be considered leisurely transport vessels among civilized worlds. And your weapons," he made a sound that Lyra's neural translator interpreted as a chuckle. "Your weapons are quaint museum pieces compared to Vrekkai disintegration cannons." Lyra's fingers twitched toward the neural interface at her temple, a reflex from her years in USC intelligence. With a thought, she could have accessed classified battle simulations that showed exactly how quaint human weapons could be. But that was precisely the advantage they needed to maintain, being underestimated. Perhaps Admiral Thorn conceded with diplomatic grace. "However, we've managed to hold our territories for 70 Earth years without outside assistance." "A statistical anomaly," countered Sub-Archon Vero, flicking a delicate, six-fingered hand dismissively. "Your kind is fragile, soft-bodied, so briefly lived. The Vrekkai will not be gentle when they come for your resources." "If I may, Admiral," Lyra interjected, ignoring the flash of irritation across Zex Voreth's features at her presumption. Thorn nodded, and Lyra stood, the smart fabric of her midnight blue uniform adjusting seamlessly to her movement. "Archon Zex Voreth, honored representatives," she began, activating the holographic display embedded in the table's surface. "While the Consortium's offer is appreciated, I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding of human capabilities." "And you are?" Zex Voreth's voice cooled several degrees. "Commander Lyra Blackwood, USC Intelligence and Diplomatic Corps." "Ah, a diplomat." The word dripped with disdain. Lyra smiled thinly. "Among other things, she manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up a stellar map of the disputed territory. The USC maintains 27 colony worlds in this region, with defensive installations that, the primitive installations, interrupted Vero. "We've studied your technology extensively, Commander. Your species lacks the neurological complexity to interface properly with advanced weaponry. Your reaction times are disappointing." Lyra kept her expression neutral, though inwardly she seethed. The Consortium, like most of the established galactic powers, had observed humanity from a distance for decades before making contact. They'd cataloged human weaknesses meticulously, but they'd failed to understand human strengths. "Sub-Archon, with respect, reaction time is only one factor in successful defense," she countered. "Strategy, adaptability, and determination can compensate for many biological limitations." Zex Voreth's mercury eyes narrowed. "You speak of intangibles, Commander. The Vrekkai deal in the tangible, plasma, antimatter, and the vacuum of space where your colony's atmosphere will disperse when their shields fail." The meeting continued in this vein for another hour, the Consortium representatives growing increasingly impatient with human stubbornness. When they finally departed, their sleek crystalline shuttle ascending with barely a whisper from the landing pad outside, Admiral Thorne turned to Lyra with a weary expression. "That went about as expected," he said. Lyra nodded, running a hand through her close-cropped dark hair. "They still think we're primitive savages who lucked into spaceflight." "Good." Thorne's lined face creased into a rare smile. "Let them think that right up until they realize their mistake." "Sir," Lyra hesitated, "intelligence reports the Vrekkai battle fleet has changed course. They'll reach Proxima Centauri in less than 2 weeks." The Admiral's smile vanished. "Then we're out of time for diplomatic games. The Consortium won't help us. They're probably hoping the Vrekkai wipe us out so they can move in afterward and claim our territories without the mess of conquest." "What are your orders, sir?" Thorne studied the star map still hovering above the table. "We proceed with Operation Pyrrhic. You leave for Proxima Station tonight." Lyra felt her heart rate accelerate. Operation Pyrrhic was the USC's most classified contingency plan, a plan she had helped design, but one she had hoped would never be implemented. "Understood, Admiral." As she strode from the conference room toward her quarters to prepare, Lyra's thoughts raced ahead to what awaited her at humanity's oldest extrasolar colony. The Vrekkai were coming, with weapons that could crack planets. The Consortium had refused assistance. And humanity's survival now rested in part on her shoulders. They thought humans were fragile creatures. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Proxima Centauri Station hung against the ruby-tinged darkness like a metallic spider's web, its sprawling habitation rings and defense platforms orbiting the USC's most heavily fortified extrasolar outpost. From the viewport of her shuttle, Lyra could see the constant movement of ships, military vessels, civilian transports, and automated defense drones swarming in complex patterns. Preparations for war. "Commander Blackwood," the shuttle's AI announced, "General Harris requests your presence in Central Command immediately upon docking." "Acknowledged," Lyra replied, checking the secure data packet downloaded directly to her neural interface during the journey from Earth. The intelligence was grim. The Vrekkai battle fleet was even larger than initially estimated. 37 capital ships, hundreds of support vessels, and thousands of fighter craft, all heading directly for Proxima Centauri. The shuttle docked with a gentle shudder, and Lyra made her way through the crowded corridors of the station. Everywhere, humans moved with purpose: military personnel, scientists, and civilian support staff. There was tension in the air, but not panic. Humans had been preparing for this moment since they first ventured beyond their solar system. Central Command was a vast circular chamber dominated by a 3-dimensional tactical display showing the Proxima Centauri system and the approaching Vrekkai fleet. General Darius Harris, a barrel-chested man with dark skin and a reputation for brilliant unpredictability, stood at the center, surrounded by his senior staff. "Commander Blackwood," he called out when he spotted her. "Welcome to the front lines." Lyra saluted crisply. "Reporting as ordered, General. Walk with me." Harris gestured toward a side corridor, away from the buzz of activity. When they were alone, he fixed her with an intense gaze. "Admiral Thorne briefed me on your special assignment. Operation Pyrrhic is now active. Are you prepared?" "I am, sir." "Good." He handed her a physical data key, an unusual precaution in an age of neural interfaces and quantum encryption. "This contains the final parameters for Project Lazarus. The research team is waiting for you on Level 17, Section C, Project Lazarus." Lyra felt a chill despite the station's regulated temperature. It was the most classified component of Operation Pyrrhic, an experimental technology that pushed the boundaries of what was considered ethically acceptable, even in wartime. "Time frame, sir?" "The Vrekkai will be in weapons range in 96 hours. We need Lazarus operational in 72. Lyra nodded, tucking the data key securely into an inner pocket of her uniform. "Any word from the Consortium?" Harris's expression darkened. "They've withdrawn all diplomatic personnel from human space. Officially, they're observing with interest the outcome of the unfortunate conflict between humanity and the Vrekkai." "Cowards," Lyra muttered. "Strategic cowards," Harris corrected. "They're waiting to see if we're worth allying with, or if we're just another failed species to be footnoted in galactic history. "We won't fail," Lyra said with conviction that surprised even her. Harris's stern expression softened momentarily. "No, we won't. Humanity has a habit of thriving precisely when others expect us to break." He straightened, the general once more. "Dismissed, Commander. You have work to do." Level 17. Section C turned out to be a heavily guarded research facility occupying an entire spoke of the station. After passing through multiple security checkpoints, Lyra was greeted by Dr. Eiko Nakamura, the project's lead scientist. "Commander Blackwood," Dr. Nakamura said, bowing slightly. She was a small woman with intelligent eyes and streaks of silver in her otherwise black hair. "We've been expecting you." "Doctor, I understand we're on an accelerated timeline." Indeed. Nakamura led her through a series of laboratories where scientists and engineers worked feverishly on equipment Lyra only partially recognized. Project Lazarus was supposed to undergo another year of testing before field deployment, but the Vrekkai decided not to wait, Lyra finished. They reached a sealed chamber at the heart of the facility. Dr. Nakamura placed her palm on a scanner, and the doors slid open to reveal what looked like a medical bay combined with an armory. In the center stood what appeared to be a sleek, humanoid exoskeleton suspended in a maintenance cradle. "Is that?" Lyra began. "The Lazarus interface," Nakamura confirmed. "The culmination of 15 years of research into human-machine symbiosis." Lyra approached it slowly. Unlike traditional powered armor, the Lazarus suit was unnervingly organic in appearance, more like an external nervous system than a mechanical exoskeleton. Filaments of what looked like liquid metal wove through crystalline matrices and biosynthetic tissue. "It doesn't look like any combat system I've ever seen," she observed. "Because it isn't, not primarily," said a new voice. A tall man with dark eyes and a severe expression emerged from an adjacent lab. "Dr. Nikhil Sharma," he introduced himself, neural integration specialist. "The Lazarus interface is designed to enhance human cognitive and physical capabilities beyond normal biological limitations, far beyond." "How far?" Lyra asked. Sharma and Nakamura exchanged glances. "Theoretically." "Oh," Nakamura said carefully, "it could allow a human operator to process information at speeds rivaling the most advanced AIs, interface directly with any compatible technology, and physically withstand conditions that would normally be instantly fatal." "Theoretically?" "We've conducted limited trials," Sharma admitted. "Short-duration interfaces with volunteer subjects. The results were promising, but the neural load is extreme. Extended connection risks permanent neurological damage." Lyra looked back at the suspended interface, understanding dawning. "And I'm to be the first full-scale test subject." It wasn't a question. She'd known when Admiral Thorne assigned her to Operation Pyrrhic what her role would likely be. Her unique combination of neuroplasticity, intelligence training, and diplomatic experience made her the ideal candidate. "Yes," Dr. Nakamura confirmed. "Your neural architecture is highly compatible with the interface design. But Commander, you should understand the risks." "I understand that if the Vrekkai break through our defenses, billions of humans will die," Lyra interrupted. "I understand that the Consortium and other galactic powers are watching to see if humanity deserves to exist among the stars. And I understand that sometimes one person must risk everything so that others may live." She turned to face the scientists directly. "When do we begin?" Nakamura's expression was solemn. "Immediately, Commander. The interface calibration alone will take 24 hours. As the medical team began preparing her for the preliminary neural scans, Lyra caught a glimpse of her reflection in a darkened display screen. She wondered, briefly, if it would be the last time she saw herself as purely human. The integration process was agony. For hours that stretched into days, Lyra's consciousness flickered between blinding pain and strange, expansive clarity as the Lazarus interface gradually merged with her nervous system. The nanofilaments threaded through her neural pathways, creating new connections, enhancing existing ones. Her body burned with fever as it simultaneously rejected and adapted to the foreign presence. Through it all, Dr. Nakamura's voice served as an anchor, guiding her through the transformation, neural pathway synchronization at 63%. Cognitive enhancement subroutines, online metabolic accelerators integrating with endocrine system. On the third day, as the Vrekkai fleet entered the outer reaches of the Proxima Centauri system, Lyra opened her eyes to a world transformed. Her vision had expanded beyond the visible spectrum. Her hearing could pick up the subtle vibrations of the station's life support systems. And her mind processed information at a speed that made her previous thought patterns seem glacially slow. She sat up on the medical bed, marveling at how she could sense every component of the Lazarus interface now integrated with her body. It didn't feel like wearing armor, it felt like having a second skin, one that enhanced rather than encumbered. Remarkable, Dr. Sharma murmured, studying the readings from her neural activity. Full integration achieved with minimal rejection. How do you feel, Commander? Lyra considered the question, aware that she was simultaneously monitoring her own vital signs, accessing the station's tactical databases, and maintaining awareness of every person in the room. I feel expanded, she said finally. Her voice sounded strange to her enhanced hearing, too slow, too limited to convey the complexity of her experience. An alarm blared, and Lyra processed the incoming tactical data before the sound had even faded. The Vrekkai had launched their first wave of attack drones toward the Proxima defense grid. It's time, she said, standing fluidly. The Lazarus interface moved with her perfectly, its surface shifting from silvery white to a deep, light-absorbing black that matched her uniform. The battle has begun. General Harris's face appeared on a nearby communication screen. Commander Blackwood, status report. Integration complete, General. Lazarus interface functioning at optimal parameters. Relief flashed across Harris's face. Thank God. The Vrekkai have deployed their advance forces sooner than expected. They've also broadcast terms of surrender to all human settlements in the system. Let me guess, unconditional capitulation or extermination. Essentially, they consider us a resource to be harvested, not a civilization to be respected. Harris's expression hardened. We've just received word that Outpost Theta on Proxima B has gone silent. Early reports indicate the Vrekkai deployed some kind of atmospheric ignition weapon. Lyra felt a surge of grief, immediately processed and channeled by the interface into cold determination. Outpost Theta had been home to over 3,000 colonists. I'm heading to Deployment Bay 5, she said. Phase 2 of Operation Pyrrhic begins now. As she strode through the station corridors toward the deployment bay, Lyra was acutely aware of the stare she attracted. The Lazarus interface had transformed her into something both human and not, her movements too precise, her presence too intense. Some personnel stepped aside instinctively, their expressions a mixture of awe and unease. In Deployment Bay 5, a sleek spacecraft waited the Firebird, a prototype stealth interceptor designed specifically for Operation Pyrrhic. Unlike the bulky military vessels that made up the bulk of humanity's defense fleet, the Firebird was elegant, and its hull composed of the same adaptive materials as the Lazarus interface. "Beautiful, isn't she?" said a voice from beneath the craft. A woman in grease-stained overalls slid out on a maintenance creeper, her red hair tied back in a practical knot. "Commander Blackwood, I presume, or should I say, the new and improved version." "And you are?" Lyra asked, though the interface had already identified the woman from station personnel files. "Olivia Reeves, chief engineer and your pilot for this suicide mission." She stood and wiped her hands on a rag. "No offense, but you look terrifying in that get-up." Despite everything, Lyra found herself smiling. There was something refreshingly normal about Reeves's bluntness. None taken. The interface is designed to intimidate. Well, it's working. Reeves gestured toward the Firebird. She's prepped and ready. Full stealth capabilities, experimental gravitic drives, and a direct neural interface port for your enhancements. If all goes according to plan, we'll be inside the Vrekkai flagship before they even realize we've left the station. And if it doesn't go according to plan? Reeves shrugged. Then we die spectacularly and hope Plan B works better. The tactical display in Lyra's enhanced vision showed the Vrekkai fleet advancing inexorably toward Proxima Station, their formation designed to overwhelm the human defenses through sheer numbers. The USC fleet was putting up a valiant fight, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Time was running out. "Let's get moving," Lyra said. "The window for infiltration closes in 43 minutes. As they boarded the Firebird, Lyra's neural link with the station's tactical systems showed the first Vrekkai weapons impacting the outer defense platforms. The battle for humanity's future had begun in earnest, and she was about to fly directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. They thought humans were fragile creatures. It was time to show them how wrong they were. The Firebird slipped through the chaos of battle like a ghost, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to the Vrekkai sensors. From the co-pilot's seat, Lyra monitored the conflict through her enhanced perception and simultaneously processing tactical data and guiding Reeves through the increasingly dense field of debris and energy weapons. "Vrekkai destroyer at .37 Mark 6, she announced, her voice unnaturally calm even as a massive explosion bloomed to their starboard side. Adjust course -15 degrees. Reeves complied with the precision of a veteran pilot, her hands dancing across the controls. "You know, it's a little unnerving how you can see things before they even show up on our sensors. The Lazarus interface allows me to process electromagnetic patterns beyond normal instrument range," Lyra explained, then suddenly tensed. "Incoming projectiles, 9 o'clock. The Firebird rolled sharply as a cluster of Vrekkai hunter-seeker drones streaked past their position, their targeting systems confused by the ship's stealth field. "That was close," Reeves muttered. "How much farther to the flagship?" Lyra's enhanced vision zoomed in on the massive vessel at the center of the Vrekkai formation, a behemoth of twisted metal and crystalline structures that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light of Proxima Centauri. "Approximately 7 minutes at current velocity. We'll need to time our approach with their shield oscillation." The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Infiltrate the Vrekkai flagship, access their command systems, and deploy the final component of Operation Pyrrhic, a specialized viral algorithm designed to exploit a theoretical vulnerability in Vrekkai quantum communication networks. If successful, it would sever the coordinated control of their fleet, turning their superior numbers into a chaotic liability. If unsuccessful, Lyra pushed the thought aside. Failure wasn't an option. "Vrekkai flagship shields oscillating now," she reported as they closed the distance, preparing for micro-jump. The Firebird's experimental drive hummed as it charged. Unlike conventional FTL systems, this one was designed for precision jumps measured in kilometers rather than light years, essentially teleporting the small craft through the momentary weak point in the flagship's shields. Jump in 3, 2, 1. The universe seemed to hiccup, reality folding around them for a heartbeat before snapping back into place. Suddenly they were inside the Vrekkai defense perimeter, drifting in a massive hangar bay filled with alien craft. "Drift power only," Lyra instructed. "Let momentum carry us to that maintenance alcove." Reeves killed the engines, guiding their silent approach using only maneuvering thrusters. The hangar bustled with activity as Vrekkai crew prepared attack craft for launch, none noticing the small human vessel gliding into the shadows of a repair station. Docking clamps engaged, Reeves confirmed as the Firebird settled into position. "Now comes the fun part." Lyra nodded, standing and checking the compact pulse weapon at her hip, though with the Lazarus interface. Her body was now a weapon in itself. "Remember, your only job is to keep the Firebird ready for immediate departure. I'll handle the infiltration." And by handle, you mean single-handedly fighting your way through an alien warship to its central command nexus. Reeves raised an eyebrow. "No offense, Commander, but even with your fancy new upgrades, those are suicide odds." "Perhaps for a normal human," Lyra agreed. "Fortunately, I'm not quite normal anymore." The Lazarus interface shifted, adapting its outer layer to better absorb ambient light. Lyra felt her metabolism accelerate as combat subroutines activated, flooding her system with enhanced neurotransmitters and nano-reinforced blood cells. "If I'm not back in 40 minutes, depart without me and transmit the abort code to Proxima Station," she instructed. "General Harris will initiate the contingency plan." "Good luck, Commander," Reeves said solemnly. "Try not to die spectacularly without me." With a grim smile, Lyra slipped through the Firebird's airlock and into the alien vessel. The interior of the Vrekkai flagship was a nightmarish blend of organic and mechanical architecture. Corridors twisted at non-Euclidean angles, their walls pulsing with what appeared to be circulatory systems carrying unknown fluids. The atmosphere was dense with a mixture of gases barely breathable to unaugmented humans, but the Lazarus interface automatically adjusted Lyra's respiration to compensate. She moved silently through the ship, her enhanced senses plotting the most efficient route to the command nexus while avoiding Vrekkai patrols. When confrontation was inevitable, she struck with inhuman speed, incapacitating rather than killing when possible, her movements a blur even to the alien's superior reflexes. What was that? A Vrekkai warrior hissed in its native tongue after she had passed, the sound automatically translated by her interface. "Unknown," replied its companion. "Alert Central Security." Lyra increased her pace. The element of surprise wouldn't last long. As she approached the central sections of the flagship, resistance grew fiercer. Twice she was forced to engage in direct combat with Vrekkai security teams, her enhanced body moving faster than their targeting systems could track. The interface constantly adapted, learning from each encounter, improving her response times and predictive capabilities. But even with her enhancements, she wasn't invincible. A glancing hit from a Vrekkai energy weapon left a burning gash across her left shoulder, the interface immediately sealing the wound and suppressing the pain response. Another close encounter depleted her pulse weapon's charge, forcing her to continue unarmed. Finally, she reached the outer chamber of the command nexus, a vast, cathedral-like space filled with swirling holographic displays and dozens of high-ranking Vrekkai officers. At the center stood a figure Lyra recognized from intelligence briefings, War Commander Drex Vol, leader of the Vrekkai expansion fleet. She paused in the shadows, assessing the situation. Direct confrontation would be suicide. She needed another approach. The interface highlighted a maintenance access point near her position, a small conduit leading to the quantum communication array that served as the flagship's nerve center. Exactly what she needed. Slipping into the narrow passage, Lyra crawled through a maze of circuits and pulsing organic technology until she reached the central processing node, a crystalline structure the size of a human torso, glowing with internal energy. "Perfect," she whispered, retrieving a small device from a compartment in the interface's forearm. The viral algorithm, contained in a specialized quantum storage medium. As she prepared to connect it to the Vrekkai systems, a harsh alarm blared throughout the ship. Her presence had been detected. Lyra worked quickly, her augmented fingers moving with precision as she interfaced the human device with the alien technology. The algorithm began its upload, spreading through the Vrekkai network like a digital infection. Suddenly, the maintenance panel behind her was ripped away, revealing a squad of Vrekkai warriors, led by a towering figure, War Commander Drex Vol himself. "Human," he snarled, his voice a guttural rumble that vibrated the air. "You dare infiltrate the sacred vessel of the Vrekkai Dominion?" Lyra stood slowly, facing the alien commander. The interface informed her that the algorithm needed another 73 seconds to fully deploy. "Time to stall." War Commander Drex Vol, she greeted with forced calm. "I come as a representative of humanity." The Vrekkai leader's compound eyes narrowed. "A representative? No, you are a saboteur." His gaze studied her transformed appearance. "And something more. Something altered." "Improved," Lyra corrected, subtly shifting her stance to a defensive position. "Just as humanity has improved since you began observing our worlds." Drex Vol made a sound like grinding stone, a laugh, perhaps. Your species is young and weak. Your improvements are meaningless against the might of the Vrekkai. If we're so meaningless, Lyra countered, watching the algorithm's progress through her enhanced vision, why commit such forces to our destruction? Why not simply ignore us? Because you are dangerous, the war commander stated flatly. Not now, but in time. We have studied your history. Your kind advances too quickly, adapts too readily. In 1,000 cycles, you would threaten our dominance. So this isn't about resources, it's about fear. Drexvol's massive frame tensed with anger. The Vrekkai fear nothing. We simply eliminate potential threats before they mature. 52 seconds remained for the algorithm upload. And yet, Lyra said, a single human has penetrated the heart of your flagship. The war commander's patience ended. He barked an order, and the warriors raised their weapons. In that moment, Lyra's perception shifted to a heightened state as the Lazarus interface initiated its emergency combat protocols. Time seemed to slow as her neural processing accelerated beyond human limits. She saw the energy building in the Vrekkai weapons, calculated trajectories, and moved. What followed was a blur of impossible motion. Lyra weaved between energy blasts, her augmented body pushing beyond normal human limitations. She disarmed 2 warriors in rapid succession, using their own weapons against their companions. But the confined space worked against her. A concentrated barrage of energy weapons superheated the air around her, turning the compartment into an inferno. The interface's external layer began to char and smoke as the temperature soared past what even it could fully mitigate. Drexvol watched with cold fascination as portions of the interface melted away, revealing burned human flesh beneath. Impressive technology, he observed. But ultimately, you remain flesh and bone fragile and mortal. Lyra felt the agonizing pain of severe burns across much of her body, the interface struggling to maintain her vital functions. But her neural connection to the algorithm showed its work was nearly complete. 3 seconds remaining. You're right, War Commander, she gasped through scorched lips. Humans are fragile, but we endure. 1 second. We walk through fire. 0. A subsonic pulse rippled through the flagship as the algorithm activated, spreading instantly through the quantum communication network to every Vrekkai vessel in the fleet. Command systems crashed, weapons targeting failed, and ship-to-ship coordination dissolved into chaos. Drexvol roared in fury as his holographic displays flickered and died. What have you done? Lyra smiled through her pain, evened the odds. Throughout Proxima space, the coordinated Vrekkai assault transformed into disarray. Without their networked intelligence advantage, individual ships became vulnerable to the tactically inferior but far more adaptable human forces. Taking advantage of the confusion, Lyra activated the emergency transponder in the interface. Her mission was complete. Now she needed to escape. But Drexvol wasn't finished. The massive alien lunged forward, grabbing Lyra by the throat with a clawed hand. Your victory will be short-lived, human. I will crush the life from you, then destroy your pathetic station myself. The interface's damage assessment flashed warnings across Lyra's vision. Critical systems failing. Neural overload imminent. But it also highlighted one last option, the interface's power core. You still don't understand, Lyra choked out. Humans never fight alone. With her remaining strength, she activated the final protocol of the Lazarus Project. The interface's power core began an uncontrolled reaction, drawing energy from its surroundings at an exponential rate. Drexvol sensed the building power and released her, stepping back in sudden alarm. What is this? A human lesson, Lyra said, collapsing to her knees as the interface glowed with intensifying energy. Sometimes, victory requires sacrifice. As consciousness began to fade, her last sight was of Reeves somehow having fought her way to the command nexus, dragging her away from the stunned Vrekkai leader. You are the most dramatic person I've ever met, Reeves grunted, hauling Lyra's limp form through the corridors of the now chaotic flagship. Self-sacrifice? Really? Not on my watch, Commander. 6 months later, Lyra stood at the observation deck of the newly reconstructed Proxima station, watching as ships from a dozen alien civilizations docked in the sprawling complex. Her body had mostly healed, though extensive scarring marked her skin where the Lazarus interface had bonded most deeply. The medical team had removed most of the technology, but some components had integrated too thoroughly with her nervous system to be safely extracted. She was neither fully human nor the hybrid warrior she had briefly become, something in between, a living reminder of how far humanity would go to survive. "Quite a gathering," remarked Admiral Thorne, joining her at the viewport. "6 months ago, they thought we were destined for extinction. Now they're lining up to establish trade agreements and military alliances. Nothing earns respect like defeating a supposedly unbeatable enemy," Lyra observed. The Battle of Proxima, as it was now known, had reverberated throughout galactic society. The Vrekkai retreat had been chaotic and absolute after the destruction of their flagship, an explosion that Lyra and Reeves had barely escaped, riding the shock wave and the damaged Firebird back to human lines. "The Consortium representatives arrived this morning," Thorne said with thinly veiled amusement. "Archon Zex Voreth himself, acting as though they supported us all along." Lyra smiled faintly. "And will we accept their belated friendship?" With appropriate diplomatic caution, the Admiral replied, "Humanity needs allies, not masters. Thanks to you, we'll be negotiating from a position of strength rather than desperation." A soft chime indicated the approach of visitors. The observation deck doors slid open to admit a delegation of aliens, not just the expected Consortium representatives, but leaders from several civilizations that had previously shown little interest in human affairs. Archon Zex Voreth led the group, his iridescent scales gleaming in the starlight from the viewport. He approached Lyra and Admiral Thorne with an elaborate gesture that his species reserved for equals, a far cry from his previous condescension. "Admiral Thorne, Commander Blackwood," he greeted formally. "The Galactic Consortium extends its official recognition of humanity as a major stellar power, with all rights and responsibilities thereof." "A generous acknowledgement, Archon," Thorne replied with practiced diplomacy. "One that might have been more meaningful before the Vrekkai invasion rather than after." The Archon's mercury eyes flickered briefly to Lyra, taking in her scarred appearance. "The Consortium misjudged humanity's capabilities and resolve. A rare error in our assessment protocols. Coming from the proud Consortium, this was as close to an apology as they were likely to get." "An understandable error," Lyra replied smoothly. "After all, we are, what was your phrase? Soft-bodied. Briefly lived. Fragile." The Archon had the grace to look discomfited. "Appearances can be deceiving, Commander. Your actions aboard the Vrekkai flagship have become something of a legend among the younger civilizations." His voice lowered. "They call you the human who walked through fire." A representative from another species stepped forward, a Mesic, their diaphanous body shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that expressed their emotional state. Currently, those patterns showed respect tinged with wonder. "Commander Blackwood," the Mesic spoke, its voice like wind through crystal. "I am Ambassador Trill Zan of the Mesic Conclave. We have studied the records of your confrontation with War Commander Drex Vol. Is it true that you continued to function despite sustaining thermal damage that would have killed any known sentient species?" Lyra exchanged a glance with Admiral Thorne, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. The full details of the Lazarus interface remained classified, but certain facts had been strategically allowed to spread throughout galactic society. "The interface protected me from the worst effects," she explained carefully. "And humans have a remarkable ability to continue functioning despite severe injury, when necessary." "Fascinating," murmured the Mesic, its patterns shifting to indicate deep thought. "The Vrekkai believe that superior physiology is the mark of an advanced species. Yet you defeated them with adaptability and what you call determination." "That's the thing about humans," Lyra said, her gaze sweeping across the alien delegation. "We're not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. But we refuse to accept limitations. We adapt, We improvise, and we never, ever give up." The observation deck fell silent as the aliens absorbed her words. In that moment, Lyra knew that humanity had crossed a threshold in galactic politics, no longer seen as primitive newcomers to be patronized or exploited, but as equals to be respected and, perhaps, feared a little. "The treaty negotiations begin tomorrow," Admiral Thorne announced, breaking the silence. "Until then, please enjoy the hospitality of Proxima Station." As the delegation dispersed, Lyra remained at the viewport, watching the stars. A familiar figure approached from behind Olivia Reeves, newly promoted to captain for her role in the battle. "Giving the aliens nightmares about the terrifying humans?" Reeves asked with a grin. "Just a healthy respect for what we're capable of," Lyra replied. Reeves leaned against the railing beside her. "You know, the med team says more of your interface components have integrated with your nervous system. They're not sure if they'll ever be able to remove them completely." Lyra nodded. She'd received the report that morning. "I'm at peace with it. A small price to pay." "A living symbol of human-machine symbiosis," Reeves mused. "The perfect diplomat for our brave new interstellar future." "Is that what I am now? A diplomat?" Among other things, Reeves echoed Lyra's words from their first meeting with a wink. "General Harris wants you to lead the new interspecies defense initiative. Apparently, several of our former enemies are quite keen to learn how humans think." Lyra smiled, watching as a consortium vessel executed a perfect docking maneuver alongside several human ships. 6 months ago, such cooperation would have been unthinkable. "They thought we were just fragile creatures," she murmured. "And now?" Reeves asked. Lyra turned from the viewport, her scarred face reflecting the starlight. The remaining elements of the interface hummed softly beneath her skin, a permanent reminder of humanity's indomitable will. Now they know better. 1 standard galactic year later, Lyra stood on the bridge of the USC flagship Prometheus, watching as representatives from 27 species gathered in the newly constructed galactic assembly on Europa. Through the ship's enhanced visual feed, she could see the massive chamber where humanity, once dismissed as primitives barely worth diplomatic consideration, now held the honored position of mediator between the ancient Consortium and the emerging alliance of younger civilizations. "Transmission from Admiral Thorne," announced the communications officer. "The treaty has been ratified. The Interspecies Defense Accord is now in effect." A cheer went up from the bridge crew. The accord represented the first galaxy-wide mutual defense pact, in recorded history, a direct response to the Vrekkai threat and similar expansionist powers lurking in the uncharted regions. Olivia Reeves, now Lyra's second in command, grinned from her station. "Not bad for a bunch of fragile creatures." Lyra nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. The remnants of the Lazarus interface beneath her skin tingled slightly, a phantom sensation that occurred whenever she felt strong emotion. The medical team had finally stopped trying to remove the components, instead focusing on helping her adapt to her unique condition. In some ways, she had become a living embodiment of humanity itself, part flesh, part technology, constantly evolving. The commander called out the sensor officer. "We're detecting an unusual quantum signature at the edge of the solar system. Pattern matches Vrekkai communication protocols." The bridge fell silent. The Vrekkai had not been seen since their defeat at Proxima Centauri, retreating to their core territories beyond the Orion Spur. "Analysis?" Lyra asked calmly. "Single vessel, minimal weapons signature. Appears to be a diplomatic craft. Intriguing." Lyra accessed the tactical display, the interface components enhancing her perception of the data. "Hail them." After a moment, a familiar face appeared on the main view screen, a face that still occasionally haunted Lyra's dreams. "Or Commander Drexval," she greeted evenly. The massive Vrekkai looked older, his exoskeleton bearing new scars and ritual markings. "I bear that title no longer," he rumbled. "I am now Speaker Drexval, representative of the Vrekkai Reform Council." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Reform Council? That's unexpected." "Our defeat at human hands prompted much reflection," Drexval explained. Our expansion policy was based on the assumption that physical and technological superiority guaranteed victory. You proved that assumption false. His compound eyes fixed on Lyra. The human who walked through fire taught us that there are other forms of strength. Lyra studied the former enemy carefully. And now I come with an offer of peace, not as supplicants, but as a civilization that has recognized its error. Drexvol's expression was unreadable to most humans, but Lyra's enhanced perception detected subtle indicators of sincerity. We would join your interspecies defense accord if you will have us. The implications were enormous. The Vrekkai possessed technology and resources that could dramatically strengthen the accord. But their history of aggression made them deeply mistrusted throughout the galaxy. You understand that trust must be earned, Lyra said carefully, and that the accord requires transparency about military capabilities. We understand. We are prepared to demonstrate our commitment. Lyra made her decision. I will convey your request to the Assembly. In the meantime, you are granted provisional diplomatic status. An escort will guide your vessel to Earth. After the transmission ended, Reeves whistled low. The mighty Vrekkai, asking to join the Humans Club. Never thought I'd see the day. Things change, Lyra replied. Species evolve. Adapt, just like us. Lyra nodded, gazing at the image of Earth rotating serenely on the view screen. From a single planet to a respected galactic power in less than a century, humanity's rise had been meteoric by cosmic standards. All because they had been underestimated. All because, when pushed to the brink, humans refused to break. They had been called fragile creatures. But now the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity's seeming fragility concealed their greatest strength, the ability to bend without breaking, to fall and rise again, to walk through fire and emerge transformed. Not invulnerable, not perfect, but indomitable.